Picture the most beautiful building human beings have ever constructed. 700 rooms, 2,000 windows, mirrors taller than trees, gardens that stretch to the horizon, fountains that spray water higher than church steeples. Now fill it with people who have not bathed in weeks. Add chamber pots emptied into stairwells, dogs relieving themselves behind gilded doors, courtiers urinating into marble fireplaces because the nearest privy is a quarter-mile of corridors away. Add 10,000 human bodies packed into that golden glass, sweating under silk, itching under powdered wigs, crawling with lice. That's Versailles, the glory of France, the envy of every king in Europe. A palace where a man could watch the most powerful monarch on earth eat his breakfast in the morning and step over a beggar dying of hunger at the gates by evening. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawking at the Hall of Mirrors. We're living it, one person, inside the machine, in the spring of 1770, the year a young adult Austrian archduchess arrived in France to marry the equally young heir to the throne. Their marriage was expected to secure an alliance and satisfy the political ambitions of two royal courts. All of Europe watched them closely, yet the private expectations placed upon the couple would remain unfulfilled for years, feeding rumours throughout Versailles. And you are going to stand close enough to hear those rumours. I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually falls asleep to them, or whether you are all simply fascinated by royal routines, palace etiquette, and the less glamorous realities hidden behind gilded walls. Either way, subscribe if you enjoy them. Get comfortable. Here we go. The first thing you learn at Versailles is that you do not exist. Not officially, not in any way that matters. You can stand in a corridor holding a tray while a duke passes close enough his sleeve to brush against you, and he will not acknowledge your presence. He's not necessarily being rude. In the rigid hierarchy of the palace, you are simply not meant to be noticed. You are furniture that moves. And the second thing you learn, the thing they beat into you within your first week, is that the moment you are seen, something has gone wrong. A servant who is noticed is a servant who has made a mistake. Your eyes open to darkness, and for half a second you have forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not one smell, it's layers. Tallow smoke from the candle stub you burned last night, greasy and animal. Damp straw from the mattress under your back, gone sour weeks ago. The sharp reek of the piss bucket in the corner, shared by the 6 of you who sleep in this attic. Somewhere below, drifting up through the floorboards, wood smoke and old cooking fat from the kitchens that never fully go cold. And under everything, the base note of the whole palace, the smell you stopped noticing after your first month and which visitors from Paris say hits them like a wall, the smell of thousands of unwashed human beings living stacked on top of one another in the most magnificent building in the world. Welcome to Versailles, May 1770. You're lying on a straw pallet in an attic room under the roof of the Grand Commune, the enormous service building across the street from the palace itself, where the kitchens are, where the food is made, where 2,000 servants sleep and eat and quarrel and die, so that a few hundred aristocrats never have to think about how their dinner appears. Your room is directly under the lead roof. In winter, the water in the basin freezes solid. Now, in May, the lead soaks up the sun all day, and by evening the room is an oven that smells of hot metal and other people's feet. Your name is Jacques Verrier. You are 16 years old. You arrived here 8 months ago from a village near Amiens in Picardy, with one spare shirt, a letter from your parish priest, and a cousin's promise that there was work at the palace for a boy who could carry things and keep his mouth shut. Back home, everyone said Versailles would be like heaven. They weren't wrong exactly. They just didn't know that heaven needs someone to empty its buckets. The bells are already going. Not church bells, palace bells, service bells, the whole nervous system of the machine waking up. Somewhere across the courtyard a clock strikes 5. You have perhaps 200 heartbeats before Marchand comes up the stairs, and if Marchand finds you on your back, today of all days, he will make you regret being born. Because today is not an ordinary day. Today the Austrian arrives. You sit up. Your back cracks in 3 places. Beside you, Toineau, a skinny 14-year-old from the Auvergne who talks in his sleep in a dialect nobody understands, is still snoring with his mouth open. You share the pallet with him. That's normal. Everyone at your level shares. Privacy is a thing that exists on the other side of the street, in the palace, and even there, not really. The King of France himself dresses in front of 100 people every morning. Privacy is not a French idea. Privacy has not been invented yet. You shake Toineau's shoulder. He swats at you. You shake him harder. The Dauphine, you say. Today, get up or Marchand will skin us both. That word does it. Toineau's eyes snap open. The Dauphine, Marie Antoinette, the 14-year-old daughter of the Empress of Austria sent across Europe to marry the Dauphin, the fat, shy, 15-year-old grandson of King Louis XV, the boy who will one day be Louis XVI. For weeks the palace has talked of nothing else. For weeks you've been scrubbing, hauling, polishing, carrying, sweating. Because tonight in the brand new opera house that has swallowed money the kingdom does not have, 5,000 of the most important people in Europe will sit down to watch a wedding feast. And every plate, every candle, every bottle of wine, every log on every fire will pass through the hands of people like you. Invisible hands. You splash water on your face from the shared basin. The water is 2 days old and has a skin on it. It smells faintly of the tin dipper and of everyone who used it before you. You drag your fingers through your hair, which needs cutting, and you dress in the dark because you know you're clothed by touch now. The rough hemp shirt gone soft at the collar from sweat and washing. The brown woolen breeches with the patch on the left knee that your mother sewed before you left and which you touch every morning without quite deciding to. Wool stockings. Shoes with wooden heels that have worn down on the outer edge because the service stairs spiral always in the same direction. And then the one thing you own that matters, the blue livery coat. It's not the grand livery, not the king's red and gold, not the silver lace of the chamber servants. It's the plain blue coat of a garçon of the kitchens, coarse cloth, brass buttons that you polish with ash and spit because Marchand checks. But it marks you. In the tangled hierarchy of this place, where a duke's valet outranks a poor country nobleman, and the woman who launders the Dauphin's shirts is a person of consequence, that blue coat says, he belongs to the machine. He is allowed to be here. Without it, you are a vagrant, and vagrants at the gates of Versailles are whipped. Appearances matter in this place. They matter more than food. You have seen courtiers who owe their tailors 10 years of income, men 1 letter away from debtor's prison, walk through the hall of mirrors in embroidered silk because to appear poor at Versailles is to stop existing entirely. Down 4 flights of black service stairs, your wooden heels clattering, hand skimming the rope that serves as a banister, its fibres greasy from 10,000 palms. The stairwell smells of last night's candle smoke and this morning's bread, and then you push through the door into the Grand Commune kitchens, and the day swallows you whole. Heat first, a wall of it. 20 fires are already burning, and it is not yet 5:30. Then noise, the scrape of iron pots dragged across stone, the thunk of cleavers going through joints of meat, the roar of the master roaster cursing a boy who let a spit stand still, the clatter of copper everywhere, hundreds of pans hanging from the beams, blazing orange in the firelight like a ceiling of shields, steam and smoke braid together under the vaults. Your eyes water. They water every morning for the first minute. Then you stop noticing. Marchand is at the long table, and he sees you the moment you come through the door because Marchand sees everything. He is the sous-chef of the kitchen of the king's household, a thick-necked man of 50 with forearms like hams, a face the colour of raw beef, and, this is the thing that surprised you at first, hands of unbelievable delicacy. You have watched those hands that could strangle a bullock, coax spun sugar into flours so fine they trembled in a draught. He's been in these kitchens for 32 years. He fed the old queen. He can tell whether a sauce has been stirred with tin or with silver by touching one drop to his tongue. "You're late," he says, without looking up from the duck he is dismantling. "You are not late." He says this every morning. You learned in your first week not to argue, because arguing is being seen, and being seen is the mistake. 600 covers tonight, Marchand says to the room at large, his knife never stopping, the duck coming apart under it like a puzzle being solved. 600 for the wedding supper of Monseigneur the Dauphin, in an opera house that still smells of paint, for every prince of the blood and half the ambassadors in Christendom, and the fish has not arrived from Dieppe, and the Swiss have blocked the north gate with their carts, and God in his wisdom has sent me you lot. He points the knife at you without turning his head. Verrier. Water. All the coppers filled by 6. Then you go to Duval at the ice house. Then you come back and you do not stop moving till I tell you that you may die. Yes, Monsieur Marchand. And Verrier. Now he does look at you, one small eye in that slab of a face. Today the whole world is watching this house. Whatever you see across the road, whatever you hear, you are a wall. Walls carry no gossip. Walls keep their positions. Understood? Yes, Monsieur Marchand. You will fail at this before the day is out. But you don't know that yet. Water is the first truth of your life at Versailles. The palace is famous for water. The fountains, 1,400 of them once, still hundreds now, throw the stuff into the sky in ropes and fans and towers, and foreign visitors weep at the beauty of it. What the visitors do not know is that the fountains are a trick. There is not enough water pressure in all of Versailles to run them at once, so when the king walks the gardens, men with whistles run ahead of him through the hedges, signalling, and each fountain leaps to life just before His Majesty rounds the corner and dies quietly the moment he has passed. The most magnificent gardens on earth are a stage set operated by sweating men hiding in bushes. Meanwhile, in the kitchens, water arrives on the shoulders of boys. You take the yoke, a curved beam of ash wood, polished smooth and dark where it has ridden 100 necks before yours, and you settle it across your shoulders, and you hook on the 2 buckets, and you walk to the reservoir cistern in the service yard, and you fill them, and you carry them back, and you pour them, and you go again. Each bucket holds maybe 30 pounds when full. The yoke bites into the muscle beside your neck in the same 2 places every day. There are calluses there now, ridges of hard skin your mother would cry to see. The trick is in the knees and the breathing. Bend at the knee, never the waist. Exhale as you lift. Let the bucket swing with your stride, not against it. or the water leaps out over the rim and soaks your stockings and you arrive with 20 pounds instead of 30, and Marchand's eye finds you. By the fourth trip, your palms are printed red where the bucket ropes cross them. By the eighth, your shoulders have gone from pain to a kind of hot silence. You have learned that the body has rooms, and you can close the doors of some of them and keep walking. Around you, the machine builds toward the wedding. Carts groan in through the gates stacked with cages of pigeons, baskets of asparagus, wheels of cheese the size of millstones. A man staggers past under half a pig. Two boys roll barrels of burgundy across the cobbles, the iron hoops ringing on the stone. A pastry cook screams a sound like a gull, because a tray of almond biscuits has been set down where a cat could reach it. And through the middle of all of it, ignoring all of it, walk the courtiers. That is the thing you still cannot get used to 8 months in. The two worlds occupy the same ground and do not touch. A marquis in dove-grey silk picks his way across the service yard. Lost, probably, or taking a shortcut to an assignation, holding a scented handkerchief to his nose, his red heels clicking, his sword swaying, and the entire roaring world of labour bends itself around him like water around a stone. Nobody stops working. Nobody looks at him directly, and he looks at nobody at all, because there is nobody there to look at. Just walls. Walls carrying pigs. You've learned the arithmetic of this place, and it is not the arithmetic of money. You handle no money. You will not touch a coin today. It is the arithmetic of rank. Everything at Versailles is measured. The number of times a door is knocked upon tells the servants inside the rank of who stands outside. Scratch with the fingernail. Never knock if it is a royal door. Whether a duchess may sit in the presence of the queen, and if so, on a chair with a back or only a stool, is a matter men have nearly fought duels over. A stool. Grown men, dangerous men, men who own villages, manoeuvring for years, for the right of their wives to sit on a stool. You thought, when you first arrived, that this was madness. Bertha set you straight. Bertha is the woman who rules the scullery of your kitchen. A widow of maybe 60 with forearms scalded pink to the elbow from 40 years of other people's dishwater, and a face like a winter apple, wrinkled and hard and somehow warm. She feeds you extra bread when Marchand isn't looking. She has buried 2 husbands and 4 children, and she knows everything about this palace, because dirty dishes come from every table in it, and gossip comes down with the grease. It isn't madness, little Picard, she told you once, up to her elbows in a copper cauldron, scouring it with sand and vinegar, the sharp smell stinging your eyes. It's a cage the old king built on purpose. Not this king, his great-grandfather, the Sun One. He took every great lord in France who might have raised an army against him, and he brought them here, and he made them fight over stools instead of provinces. A duke who spends his fortune on lace, and his mind on who hands the king his shirt, is a duke who will never trouble the throne. The whole palace is a trap, boy. The gold is the bait. They walked in 100 years ago, and they still haven't noticed the door shut behind them. She rinsed the cauldron, hefted it one-handed like it weighed nothing, and hung it on its hook. And you and me, we live in the walls of the trap. Safest place to be. The trap never eats the walls. Remember that. It will matter later. At Versailles, the walls are the only ones who are free. At mid-morning, Marchand sends you to the ice-house, and this is how you come to see her arrive. The ice-house lies out past the kitchen gardens, a stone dome sunk into the earth like a buried egg. packed each January with ice cut from the ponds and layered with straw, so that in May, in this age before anyone has imagined a machine that makes cold, the king's table can have chilled wine and frozen creams. You go down the steps into it and the temperature drops 30 degrees in 10 feet. Your sweat turns to a cold film on your back. Your breath appears in front of your face. The air smells of wet straw and stone and something older, something like the inside of a well. Duval, the iceman, whose hands are cracked and purple year-round, chips blocks free with an iron bar, wraps them in sacking and loads the handcart, and the two of you haul it back along the gravel path, the wheels crunching, the melting ice already darkening the sacks and dripping a trail behind you like the cart is bleeding. And that is when you hear it, a sound like weather, like a storm front made of human voices rolling in from the direction of the Paris road. Duval straightens up, hand pressed to his back. That'll be the Austrian then. You cannot see the road from where you stand, but you can hear the crowd, thousands upon thousands of people packed along the avenue since before dawn, and the sound they are making as the procession passes is not exactly cheering. It rises and falls, moving closer, an enormous animal murmur shot through with shouts. 57 carriages you will hear later. The girl herself in a berlin of crystal and gilt built specially for the journey, drawn by 8 horses, having travelled for 2.5 weeks from Vienna. You will also hear, because the walls hear everything, what was done to her at the border. At Kehl, on an island in the Rhine, on the very line between the Empire and France, they built a wooden pavilion, and inside it the 14-year-old girl was stripped. Everything Austrian was taken from her. Her gown, her stockings, her shoes, her ribbons, her little dog. The rule was ancient and absolute. A foreign princess brings nothing foreign onto French soil, keeps nothing, not a pin, not a friend. Her Viennese ladies were dismissed on one side of the pavilion. She walked out the other side dressed entirely in French cloth, surrounded entirely by French strangers, and by all accounts she was weeping, and by all accounts she then straightened her back, walked to the Comtesse de Noailles, and embraced her, because even at 14 she understood the assignment: be charming or be destroyed. They took her dog. Remember that, the next time someone tells you it is easy to be a princess. A 14-year-old girl sold to seal an alliance between 2 empires that had hated each other for 250 years, and the first thing her new country did was take her dog. You stand there in the kitchen garden with your cart of bleeding ice, and the sound of the crowd swells, and over the wall, over the roofs, you can just see it. Dust rising golden in the May light above the avenue, and the flash, quick, repeated, dazzling, of sunlight off the polished carriages, off breastplates, off the crystal coach, moving toward the great gates. Somewhere inside that flashing dust is a child who has not chosen one single thing that has happened to her in the last month. "Move," says Duval. "Ice waits for no princess." By afternoon the whole below-stairs world knows how the first meeting went, because 30 servants stood in that courtyard and every one of them talked. How the girl leapt from the carriage before anyone could hand her down. A scandal in itself, princesses do not leap, and threw herself into the king's arms. How old Louis XV, 60 years old, still handsome, a man who appraises women the way Marchand appraises fish, looked her over and was pleased. And how, standing behind his grandfather, there was the boy, the Dauphin, Louis-Auguste, 15 years old, tall and heavy with weak blue eyes. He is short-sighted, badly, and spectacles are beneath a prince's dignity, so he moves through his own wedding half-blind, recognizing no one, squinting at a world of coloured smears. A boy who loves exactly 3 things: hunting, locksmithing, and being left alone. A boy whose own tutors described him in writing as seeming to have been raised in a forest. A boy who, when his glittering bride was presented to him, this girl the whole continent was talking about, kissed her on the cheek as required, and then, according to every witness, said almost nothing, looked at his shoes, and wrote in his hunting diary for that day a single word: rien. Nothing. He meant no game killed. The diary was a hunting log, and there had been no hunt. But the word will follow him forever, because it was also, as it turned out, a prophecy. The wedding itself, on the 16th of May, you experience the way the walls experience everything, as weight, heat, and sound coming through stone. You are one of the chain of servants running dishes from the grand commune kitchens, across the street, through the service tunnels, to the staging rooms behind the new opera house. And I need you to understand what running dishes means in 1770, because this is not a waiter's tray. The grand service is built like siege warfare. Courses of 40, 50 dishes at a time carried in procession. A silver platter of roasted fowl, dressed and rebuilt in its feathers, weighs as much as a small child, and the silver itself is worth more than your village, not the food, the plate. You carry it at shoulder height through corridors precisely wide enough, upstairs whose every tread you know blind, moving fast but never appearing to hurry, because a servant who hurries announces that something is wrong. The heat of the dish comes through the silver into your palms. You've learned to fold a cloth just so under the fingers, but there is always a line along the base of the thumbs where the metal finds you, and by the 10th trip that line is a bright stripe of pain, and by the 20th you have closed that room of the body too, and the pain is just information. Grease works its way into the cracks of your knuckles. The smell of 200 roasted birds saturates your coat, your hair, the inside of your nose, until you cannot smell it anymore and know it only by the way a passing guard's head turns as you go by. Hungry, involuntary. And through the walls, all evening, the wedding. You hear the chapel service only as a distant tide of organ and Latin, but the storm you hear plainly, because on the wedding day of Marie Antoinette and Louis-Auguste, as 6,000 spectators in diamonds packed the palace, and thousands more stood in the gardens waiting for fireworks, the sky over Versailles turned the colour of a bruise and opened. Rain like thrown gravel against the windows, thunder that you feel in the soles of your feet on the service stairs. The fireworks are cancelled. The crowds in the garden scatter, soaked, trampling the flower beds. Half the court whispers that it is an omen, because this court believes in omens the way it believes in stools, which is to say, completely. You are in the corridor behind the opera house, waiting with an empty platter, when the supper ends and the procession forms for the ritual that ends every royal wedding in France. And this is where you see them close for the first time, the public bedding. Understand what is about to happen, because it is one of the strangest things human beings have ever considered normal. A royal marriage is not a private matter. It is a treaty, and a treaty must be witnessed. So the entire court, the king, the princes of the blood, the ambassadors, dozens of the greatest people in Europe, escorts the 2 children to their bedchamber. The Archbishop of Rheims blesses the bed, walking around it swinging holy water. The king himself hands his grandson the nightshirt. The senior married duchess hands the bride hers. The two of them are put into the bed, sitting up against the pillows like dolls, and the curtains are drawn back one last time so that the whole crowd can see them there together, married in the eyes of God, and this is the point, about to be married in the eyes of biology. Then everyone bows and withdraws, and the doors close, and all of Europe waits. You see them for perhaps 8 seconds, through a gap between shoulders, from the service door at the far end of the gallery as the procession passes. She's tiny. That is the first shock. All month the whole world has said her name, and here she is, a small fair-haired girl with skin like the inside of a shell, grey-blue eyes enormous with exhaustion, a jaw set with the effort of performing serenity, glittering under a weight of diamonds that must drag at her neck like your water yoke drags at yours. 14, your sister's age, and beside her the boy. Big, soft, blinking, magnificent in cloth of gold and radiating, even at 40 paces, even to a kitchen boy who's never been taught to read faces, one single legible emotion: terror. He had eaten at the wedding supper the way a condemned man eats, enormously, mechanically. His grandfather, the king, a man who has never in his life met an appetite he did not indulge, leaned over and suggested in front of everyone that he not overload his stomach on this of all nights. And the boy answered, "Why not? I always sleep better after a good supper." The doors close on them. The court disperses into the wet, glittering night, laying bets, and the next morning the whole palace knows. Nothing happened. The boy slept, fell asleep by every account, almost at once, and at dawn got up and went hunting. Beside him the girl from Vienna lay awake in the state bed of the Dauphin of France, in a room the size of your entire village church, listening to a stranger snore. Here is what you must understand. What makes this a catastrophe, and not a comedy? Her mother, the Empress Maria Theresa, ruler of half of Europe, sent her to France for exactly one purpose: to bind Austria to France by producing an heir with French and Habsburg blood. Until there is a child, the alliance is a piece of paper, and pieces of paper tear. Until there is a child, and this is the brutal, unspoken, universally understood rule, the girl herself is disposable. Unconsummated royal marriages can be annulled. There are factions at this court, powerful ones, who hate the Austrian alliance and would like nothing better than to send the little Archduchess home in disgrace. Every morning that bed stays chaste, their knives get a little sharper. She's 14 years old, alone in a foreign country that took her dog, and her job, her only job, the job her mother writes to remind her of in letter after letter, crossing Europe by courier, is to make a frightened boy love her. And she cannot, and the entire world is watching. The Spanish ambassador is bribing her chamber servants for reports on the sheets. Bribing? The state of a teenager's bedsheets is diplomatic intelligence, discussed in cipher in dispatches in 3 capitals. Berta hears you retelling this in the scullery, because of course you fail at being a wall. Everyone fails. The walls of Versailles are made entirely of mouths. And she cuffs you round the ear, but gently. Careful, little Picard, but since you ask, she lowers her voice, scouring, not looking at you. I'll tell you what the laundry says. The laundry always knows first. The laundry says, nothing, and nothing, and nothing, and I'll tell you something else. Everyone will blame her. You watch. The years will go by, and it will be her fault. Too Austrian, too frivolous, too something. That's how it goes for girls, boy. When a man fails in the bedroom, they find a woman to carry it. She hauls a stack of copper pans to the rack, arms pink and steaming. Poor little things, she says, to the dishwater more than to you. Both of them. There's no cage at this court crueler than that bed. In the weeks after the wedding, your own life changes, and it changes because of firewood. One of the palace fire boys, the garçons who feed the hearths of the state apartments, breaks his ankle on the service stairs, stepping on a wine cork some courtier dropped, and Marchand, who owes a favour to the man who manages the fires, lends you across the road. And so you become, 3 mornings a week, one of the boys who goes inside. The first time you carry wood into the palace proper, you disgrace yourself, not by dropping anything, by stopping. You come up the hidden stair, through a door that on the far side is not a door at all. It is a panel of painted wall, invisible, one of dozens of servant doors cut into the decoration so that firewood and chamber pots and hot water can materialize in the state rooms as if by magic, without any human agency being seen. And you step out, bent under your carrier of split oak, into the hall of mirrors at 6 in the morning, and you stop. The hall runs 240 feet, longer than any building in Picardy, longer than your parish church and the churchyard together. 17 arched windows down one side facing the gardens, and facing them, 17 arches of mirror, 357 panes of mirrored glass, made in Paris because the mirror makers of Venice guarded their secret with assassins, and France had to steal it. At 6 in the morning the hall is empty, and the light comes in low and level off the garden terraces, off the great pools, and strikes the mirrors, and the mirrors throw it the length of the room, gilding the gold, doubling the chandeliers, doubling you, a small figure in blue, bent under wood, repeated into a fog of gold and glass. 40 Jacques Verrier dwindling into brightness, every one of them staring. Above you, painted across the whole vault of the ceiling, the Sun King rides through clouds, crushing his enemies, being handed the world. The men who painted it were still alive when your grandfather was a boy. This is not ancient history. The paint is barely 3 generations dry. A floor polisher, working the parquet on the far side with brushes strapped to his feet, skating slowly through the gold like a man crossing a frozen lake of fire, sees you standing there with your mouth open and hisses at you, not unkindly. Move, boy! If they find you gawping, they'll think you're planning to steal it. You move. But every time after, crossing that hall at dawn, you allow yourself 3 steps of looking. 3 steps. You ration it, the way you ration everything. And here is what living in the walls teaches you that the tourists never learn. The closer you get to the gold, the stranger the life inside it looks. Because now you see the Dauphine's mornings, not directly. You feed fires in ante-rooms and gallery stoves. You are never in the presence. But the walls see. The walls hear. And you are becoming an educated wall. Every morning of her life now begins with the lever, the ceremonial rising, and it works like this. She may not dress herself. She may not even be handed her own shift by just anyone. The right to hand the Dauphine her chemise belongs to the highest-ranking woman present, and rank must be recalculated leave in the room every morning. Bertha's favourite story, it goes round the scullery like a coin, is of the winter morning when the girl stood stripped and waiting while the chemise passed from the lady of honour to a duchess who had just entered. And then the door opened again and a princess of the blood came in, and the chemise had to be passed again. The girl standing there naked with her arms crossed over her chest in a room where the water froze in the vases, whispering through her teeth, This is odious. What tiresomeness. Getting a princess into her underwear at Versailles can take 3/4 of an hour if the doors keep opening. She eats her dinner in public. Twice a week, anyone decently dressed may file through and watch the royal family chew. Parisians make day trips of it. You have seen the queue. They watch her the way you watch the mirrors. She is followed everywhere, reported everywhere, and she is failing at the one thing that matters, and everyone knows it, and no one may speak of it, and everyone speaks of it. And the boy, her husband, the future king, you actually see him. This is the strangest privilege of your new duties, because the Dauphin, who is a mystery to the ambassadors of Europe, is no mystery below stairs. He comes down to the forges. There is a metalworking shop in the palace attics where he goes, whenever the machine loosens its grip on him to make locks. Real locks, with a master locksmith named Germain, filing and fitting, his soft white hands going black. You have carried charcoal up to that workshop and stood 3 feet from the heir to the throne of France, while he worked a file across a lock plate. The shick of it, steady as a heartbeat. His weak eyes finally, for once, at exactly the right distance from something, his whole face slack with relief. He looked up at you when you set the charcoal down. Looked directly at you. Nobody at Versailles had looked directly at you in 8 months. "Thank you," said the Dauphin of France to you, a wall. And you understood something in that moment that all the diplomats straining at their keyholes did not. It is not that he is cold or a fool. It is that this boy has been on stage since the day he was born, half blind in the lights, orphaned at 11, told daily he must fill the largest role in Europe, and the crowd terrifies him, and his wife is the crowd's darling, its brightest ornament, its quickest wit. And every time he reaches for her, 6,000 people and 3 governments are watching his hands. Some men would rise to that. He's not some men. He is a boy who is only calm when he is holding a file. "Rien," he wrote. Nothing. But you have seen his face at the forge, and you know the truth is worse than nothing. The truth is everything, all the time, and no lock he can pick to get out of it. Let me take you outside the gates for a moment, because you cannot understand the palace without the town, and the town of Versailles in 1770 is a thing that has to be walked to be believed. On your rare free hours you walk it, and it is chaos of a particular kind. A boom town grown up around a court the way a shanty town grows around a gold mine. 60,000 people live here now, in a place that a century ago was a swamp with a hunting lodge in it. And the old men in the wine shops will tell you the ground remembers, that the cellars flood, that the Sun King drained the marshes with the bodies of his workmen, thousands of them dead of marsh fever, carted away at night so the sight would not spoil the gardens. That part is true, by the way. They died in such numbers that it was forbidden to speak of the deaths at court. The most beautiful palace in the world stands on drained swamp and unspoken graves. The streets nearest the palace are wide and straight and stately, 3 great avenues aimed at the royal courtyard like the tines of a trident, but step off them and you are in the churn. Lodging houses where 4 families share a floor, cook shops breathing grease into the lanes, wig makers, sword cleaners, sellers of second-hand court clothes, because there is an entire industry here of renting respectability coats and swords hired by the day, so that a provincial nobody can dress well enough to get past the guards and gawk at the king's dinner. Sedan chairs shove through the crowds, water carriers cry their trade, beggars, whom the guards sweep from the avenues each morning, seep back by noon like groundwater. Pickpockets work the crowds outside the gates on audience days with the calm professionalism of men at a trade fair, because where else in France can you find so many purses so distracted by gold in the middle distance? And everywhere, the smell of horses, 2,000 of them and more in the royal stables alone, the great and small stables curving around the head of the avenues like two enormous arms. The town runs on horses and is paved in every gutter with what horses leave behind. On hot days, the air over Versailles is a broth of dung, dust, cook smoke, powder, and orange blossom drifting over the wall from the king's orangery. 1,000 orange trees in silver tubs, tended like princes, their perfume laid over the stink of the town like silk over a wound. You will smell that exact combination once or twice again in your life, decades from now, and it will drop you back into being 16 so hard your knees will buckle. That is Versailles. Silk over a wound. Never forget the order of the layers. It is on one of these walks, in your first July, that you learn the other lesson of the gates, the one about bread. There is a woman who sells small beer near the market of Notre Dame, and you are drinking a cup of it in the shade when the bread cart comes through, and you watch the crowd move toward it, and you see the faces do their arithmetic, and you understand suddenly that you are the only person at your end of the street who is not hungry. You, the bucket boy, the wall, you eat twice a day, every day, from the overflow of the greatest kitchens in Europe. Soup that came back untouched from a table of countesses, bread baked this morning, the scrapings and seconds of a machine that roasts 200 birds for supper and calls it Tuesday. Below stairs at Versailles, you have eaten, without thinking, things a labourer's family out here would remember for a year. The harvest was bad last year. The price of bread has been climbing like a fever. A man out here works 14 hours and hands half his wage, more than half, straight to the baker, and the mathematics of his life have no room in them at all. One bad month, one sick week, one further rise in the price of flour, and his children beg. And 100 yards away, over that wall, the fountains are dancing for no one and the orange trees are wearing silver. Nobody in the beer shop talks revolution. It is 1770. The word barely exists yet in the sense you are thinking of. What they talk is grievance in the old worn grooves. The grain merchants are hoarding, the ministers are thieves, the king is deceived by wicked men, if only the king knew. The king is not blamed, not yet. The king is still the father. But you notice, 16 years old, standing with your beer, noticing more than is comfortable, that when the talk turns to the court itself, to the cost of the wedding, to the new opera house, to the diamonds, the voices change key. Something colder comes into them, and more than once already this early, you hear the girl's name, the little Dauphine, the Austrian, said with an edge that has nothing to do with anything she has done, because she has done nothing yet except arrive, and be young, and wear what she was dressed in. L'Autrichienne, they call her, the Austrian woman. Said fast in the local mouth, the word breaks into something uglier. L'Autrichienne, the other dog. She is 14. She has been in France 10 weeks, and they have already found the word they will kill her with. 23 years from now. You walk back to the Grand Commune before the light goes, past the sentries into the smell of stock and smoke that means safety now, and you do not tell Bertha what you heard, and she does not need you to because the walls have heard it for weeks. But I've gotten ahead of myself because before that quiet July there was the 30th of May, and the 30th of May is the night you will carry for the rest of your life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the city of Paris throws its own celebration for the Dauphin's marriage, the capital not to be outdone by the palace. A great fireworks display on the Place Louis XV, the huge new square at the edge of the city where the statue of the king stands, where one day, though no one alive can imagine it, a machine called the guillotine will stand instead, in a square renamed for revolution, and the boy and girl this party honours will both die on it in that exact place within 9 months of each other. History does this sometimes. It builds the stage decades early and lets everyone dance on it first. You are there because of geese and ice. A convoy goes up from the palace with provisions for one of the princely households keeping the festival in town, and hands are needed, and Marchand, who has decided without ever saying a word that could be mistaken for approval that you are reliable, puts your name in. You ride the last miles into Paris on the tail of a cart with your legs hanging down, and you see the city rise around you, and it swallows the road, and it keeps rising, street after street after street, until your neck aches from looking. 600,000 people. The biggest thing human beings have ever built as far as you know or care. The stink of it reaches you before the walls do. River mud, tanneries smoke humanity, and the noise never stops, and you love it instantly, the way you love thunderstorms. By evening your work is done, and the boy you've been paired with, a Paris-born undercook's assistant named Colin, who claims to know everything and knows perhaps half of it, talks you into staying for the fireworks. Everyone in Paris has the same idea. Everyone. The Place Louis XV that night holds a crowd no one can count. Later they will say hundreds of thousands, packed into the square and the surrounding streets, come to see the ski lit for the wedding. Understand the geography, because the geography is the killer. The square is bounded on one side by the river, on another by deep ditches, dry moats, part of the square's grand design, and the main way in and out for the mass of the crowd funnels through the Rue Royale, a single street, still half a construction site, choked with building materials and parked carriages. Hundreds of thousands of people, one good exit. You and Colin worm your way to a spot near the Garde Meuble colonnade, wedged so tight that you stop deciding where your own feet go. The crowd holds you upright. You could lift both feet off the ground, you think, and not fall. It is festive, hot, immense. A man beside you has a child on his shoulders. Vendors somehow still move through the crush selling wine and wafers. The first rockets go up and the whole square gasps as one animal, one enormous golden gasp, and the light blooms and crackles over 100,000 upturned faces, and you think, I will remember this forever. You will, not for the reason you think. What happens next happens fast and in the dark, and no two survivors will ever tell it exactly alike, and this is the truest version anyone has assembled. Partway through the display, something goes wrong at the firing site. A rocket misfires into the stores of fireworks, the reserve catches. Instead of a display, there is suddenly a fire, a real fire on the ground among the scaffolds, and the crews fight it, and the display is dead, and the immense crowd, disappointed, all begins to leave at once. At the same moment, from the boulevards, fresh thousands are still arriving, pushing in. Two rivers of human beings meet head-on in the Rue Royale in the dark, in a half-built street full of stone and timber and ditches. You feel it before you understand it. The crowd, which all evening has been a warm, firm thing holding you like water, changes state. A pressure comes through it, from the direction of the street, wave after wave, each one harder. The man with the child says to no one, "Stop pushing." And 100 voices are suddenly saying it, "Stop pushing, stop pushing." And then the voices stop being words. I need you to understand what a crowd crush actually is, because it is not trampling, mostly. Nobody needs to fall. The pressure alone does it. When packed people push against packed people, the force adds up, body through body, like water pressure with depth, until at the worst points chests simply cannot expand to draw breath. People die standing up, held upright by the same press that is killing them, inches from people who cannot lift an arm to help and are dying themselves. The strength of 10 men could not save you. Strength has nothing to do with it. The crowd has become a single object, and the object is heavier than anything you have ever imagined, and you are inside it. The wave reaches you. It takes you off your feet without letting you fall. You are simply carried, your shoes scraping and then not touching, your arms pinned to your sides as if bound. The pressure on your ribs is like the water yoke, then like 2 water yokes, then like nothing you have a comparison for. You learn in about 4 seconds the thing that everyone in that street is learning. You breathe with your ribs, and when your ribs cannot move, no willpower on earth breathes for you. You get half breaths, sips. The world goes very bright at the edges. Somewhere near you a woman's voice climbs and climbs and then is gone, not fading. Gone, like a candle pinched. What saves you is being 16, and small, and lucky, and Colin, Paris-born, who has been in festival crowd since he could walk, gets a hand into your collar and drags you with him along the face of the colonnade, working the seam between the crowd and the stone. There is always a seam, he will tell you afterward. Crowds grind against walls like ice against a hull, and there are gaps in the grinding, and he finds a doorway, a recessed doorway, maybe 2 feet deep, and he hauls you into it, and the 2 of you press into that stone slot like tools into a case while the object made of people scrapes past and past and past. You stand in that doorway for what is probably an hour. You hear everything. You will spend years trying to stop hearing it. When it loosens, crushes loosen the way floodwater goes down, without decision, without mercy, just physics finishing its work, you come out into the square, and the square is a battlefield with no enemy, shoes everywhere. That is the detail that undoes you. Hundreds of shoes scattered the length of the street, prized off living and dead feet by the pressure. Torn coats, broken sedan chairs, and along the walls laid in rows already by the watch and by volunteers, the dead, brought out of the ditches where the crowd's edge poured over in the dark, out of the street, out of doorways like yours that were 2 feet too shallow. Their faces by torchlight are mostly not agonized. That is the horror. They look like sleepers who have been misplaced. 132 dead. That is the official count published of that night. Paris itself never believed the number. Paris buried its own and muttered that the true count was several times higher. You, who were in the doorway, take no position, except that you helped carry 6 of them, and none of the 6 was older than you. The city's celebration for the marriage of Louis and Marie Antoinette ends with the morgue of the Madeleine Cemetery filled with wedding guests. The Cemetery of the Madeleine. Mark that name. 23 years from now, when the guillotine has done its work in that same square, it is the Madeleine's pits that will take the king's body, and then the queen's, quicklime and no stone, a few minutes' walk from the ditches where their wedding party died. The stage was built early, every part of it. And here is the thing that history remembers to the couple's credit, and you should too. When the news reaches Versailles, the 15-year-old Dauphin takes the entire month's allowance he receives for his personal spending and sends all of it to the city for the relief of the victims' families with a note in his own hand. It is all I have to give. The Dauphine sends her own purse likewise, and by the accounts of those around her, weeps for days and for years afterward keeps the anniversary. They were children, and they answered like decent children, and Paris for a while loved them for it. Hold on to that. The story gets darker later, and everyone in it will be flattened into a cartoon, and it will be worth remembering that in 1770 there was a fat, shy boy who gave everything in his pockets, all he had, to the shoe-strewn street. You ride back to Versailles the next day on the same cart, empty now, your ribs aching in a band that will take a month to fade, and Colin doesn't talk, and you don't talk, and the towers of the palace come up over the trees golden and serene, as if nothing in the world had ever gone wrong, and you understand that you have now seen both of France's faces in the same fortnight, the wedding and the ditch, and that they are the same face. Marchand looks at you when you come into the kitchen, looks at your face, at the way you are holding yourself. He doesn't ask. He hands you a bowl of soup off the fire, which he has never done before and will never do again, and he says only, "Eat, then the coppers want filling." It is, you understand much later, the kindest thing he knows how to say. The machine goes on. That is not the machine's cruelty. That is its mercy. The coppers want filling, and your hands know how, and there is a use for you, and by the 10th bucket the roaring in your head has gone down to a murmur, and by the 30th you're only a boy carrying water, and that is all you want to be. The summer that follows teaches you the palace's rhythms the way the first month taught you its geography, and the deepest rhythm of all, the drumbeat under everything, is the bed. You would think, anyone sane would think, that what happens between two married teenagers at night is their own business. At Versailles in 1770 it is the business of Europe, and I want to walk you through exactly how public a private failure can be, because there has rarely in history been anything like it. Every month, the girl's body is reported to Vienna. Her own lady-in-waiting writes to the Empress. The Austrian ambassador, Count Mercy, a smooth, careful man who has spies among her women, writes to the Empress. The girl herself must write to her mother about what she calls, in their private code, the General, and when the General arrives on schedule month after month, meaning no child, meaning nothing, the letters cross Europe with the news, sealed and ciphered, carried by couriers who could be robbed for gold and are actually carrying gynecology. Her mother's replies are love and knives in alternating sentences. Everything depends on you, the Empress writes. Be more caressing. Be more patient. Never sulk. Your whole position rests on this. A 14, then 15, then 16-year-old girl, opening letters from the most formidable woman in Europe, being told in her mother's own hand that the failure of a boy to touch her is her failure, her risk, her fault to repair. And the court itself keeps score in the open. When the king wants to needle the Austrian ambassador, he inquires sweetly after his grandson's progress. The Dauphin's own brothers-in-waiting smirk. The Comte de Provence, the Dauphin's next brother, 15 and clever and venomous, drops remarks at supper calculated to reach exactly the ears they wound. Pamphlets are already being scribbled in Paris, filthy ones, laughing ones, about the locksmith prince who cannot find the keyhole. You have heard kitchen boys sing a verse of one, and seen Berta put down a pan with a crack like a pistol shot, and tell them that the next voice she heard would finish its song in the fish cellar. They stopped. Berta's threats are structural, like the palace's walls, and the boy and girl themselves, this is what the walls know that the pamphlets don't, are not enemies. That is the sad, human centre of it. They are two awkward children who were introduced on a Wednesday and married on a Saturday, and they're slowly, clumsily, becoming something like friends. She teases him, and he allows it, which those who know him say he allows no one. He gives her gifts with the shy, overthought precision of a boy who has planned the giving for a week. When she is mocked at cards for her French, he goes red before she does. Whatever is wrong in that bedroom, and the theories will fill books for 250 years. A physical problem needing a small surgery, says one camp. Nothing but paralyzing shyness, ignorance, and mismatched sleep, says the sounder one. For what doctors report survives suggests a healthy boy. Whatever it is not hatred. It is two children alone on the most public stage on earth, each terrified of disappointing the other, each disappointing the other nightly by being terrified, locked in a loop neither has the words to break, because no one has ever taught either of them any words for any of this at all. 7 years this will last. 7 years of reported sheets and ciphered dispatches. It will take in the end a visit from her brother, the Emperor Joseph himself, travelling incognito, who will sit the two of them down in 1777 and talk to them with a bluntness no one in France dared use, and write home to Vienna a letter so plain-spoken about what he found that historians still wince. And within months of that visit the thing will finally, quietly, at long last be done, and the following year a daughter will be born, and the girl, by then a queen of a 22, will hold her and say, "Poor little one, you are not desired, but you will be none the less dear to me." 7 years. Keep that number beside the other numbers of this place. The 357 mirrors, the 2,000 horses, the 132 dead of the Rue Royale. Because Versailles is a machine for turning human lives into numbers, and the only revenge available is to remember that every number was warm once and frightened, and did its best. You know none of the future that summer. You know buckets, and firewood, and the seam of cool air along the North Service corridor, and the exact weight of a full copper, and the way Berta hums when the gossip is good. You are 17 now. Your shoulders have changed shape around the yoke. Marchand has begun, without announcement, teaching you things. How to draw a fowl, how to judge a fish's eye, how to keep a stock at the shiver just below the boil for 6 hours by the sound of it alone, a sound like rain heard from indoors. He corrects you with the flat of his knife on your knuckles, and once, when you clarify a consommé glass bright on the first try, he looks into the pot for a long moment and says, which from Marchand is a triumphal procession. One evening at the end of that summer he keeps you back after the coppers are scoured, and pours 2 fingers of cooking wine into 2 cups, and gives you 1, which has never happened, and he looks at you with his small, shrewd eye. You saw ugly things in Paris, he says. It is not a question. And you see foolish things here every day. Gold on fools, hunger at the gates, a whole country carried on shoulders like yours and mine. And you're clever enough to have noticed, which is a misfortune. So I'll tell you the only wisdom I own, boy. and you'll do with it what you like. He turns the cup in his enormous delicate fingers. Kings and their beds come and go. I've cooked under 2 of them, and I'll be dead under the 3rd. But somebody fed every builder of every palace that ever stood, and somebody will be feeding people when every stone of this one is down. The work in your hands is older than the crown, and it will outlive the crown. Learn it properly. That's all. That's the whole sermon. Learn it properly, and you'll always be worth your soup, whoever's face is on the coin. He drinks and stands, and the moment is over, and he's only marchand again, growling at the state of the spit irons on his way out. He is wrong about one thing. He will not die under the 3rd king. He will die in the winter of 1788, in his bed above the kitchens, 1 year short of watching the world he served come apart. And you will think at his funeral that it was the one mercy the machine ever granted him. Now, let me show you the theatre, because you cannot say you've lived at Versailles until you have watched the royal family eat in public, and in your 2nd winter you finally see it from the front. It happens because of a jammed flue. A stove in the guardroom off the Queen's staircase smokes. You're sent up with a boy from the fumistes to clear it. The work runs long, and when you come out into the passage with soot to your elbows, the flood catches you. The public streaming toward the state apartments for the grand couvert, the ceremonial supper, and rather than fight upstream, you and your soot let yourselves be carried along at the edge of it. One more pair of eyes. Here is the astonishing rule, and I promise you it is true. The Palace of Versailles is open. Anyone may enter. Any man decently dressed, with a sword at his side and a hat under his arm, walks past a Swiss guard unchallenged. And at the gates, as I told you, you can rent the sword and the hat. Farmers on market day, lawyers, clerks, pickpockets, English tourists making their grand tour with notebooks out. They all flow up the marble stairs together, and twice a week they flow to watch the most powerful family on earth have its dinner, the way you'd watch lions fed. You wedge in at the back of the antechamber, behind a wall of shoulders and wig powder, the air already thick. Hundreds of bodies, wet wool steaming, candle smoke, scent fighting, sweat, and losing. At the far end of the room, behind a low balustrade, a table faces the crowd like an altar, and they come in, and they sit, and they eat, and everyone watches. The old king eats magnificently. It is one of the sights of the Europe. He can take the top off a boiled egg with a single stroke of his fork, and people travel from Paris to see him do it. And when he does it, a murmur of satisfaction goes through the room as if he had won a small battle. The Dauphin eats the way you now know he does everything public, head down, methodical, getting through it. And the little Dauphine, who must be watched eating by strangers twice a week for the rest of her life, has already perfected the defence she will be famous for. She barely eats at all. She sits erect under the eyes, gloves off, touching almost nothing, a public performance of a girl having dinner, saving her actual appetite for a chicken and a glass of water alone later, because even a princess's hunger is not her own here, and the only privacy left her is refusal. You watch for perhaps a quarter of an hour packed in the crowd's heat, and the thing that stays with you is the sound. Hundreds of spectators trying to be quiet, which is a sound in itself, a sea hiss of breath and silk and shuffled feet, and under it the small domestic clink of the royal spoons, magnified by silence into something enormous. Cutlery as spectacle. A family dinner performed nightly to a full house for 100 years. On your way back down the service stair, the fumister boy, a Parisian, shakes his head and delivers the whole verdict of his city in one sentence. They keep the animals better fed than the menagerie, but the cage is smaller. And since we are speaking of cages, this is also the winter you finally understand the war, because there is a war on at Versailles in these years, fought entirely without weapons, entirely in gestures, and its front line is a few square feet of parquet, and the walls follow it the way other countries follow real wars. On one side, Madame du Barry, the old king's mistress, born Jeanne Bécu, natural daughter of a seamstress, raised from the shops and, the court whispers accurately, from considerably lower, to be the companion of the King of France, glittering, good-natured, drenched in diamonds, and holding, because of the king's affection, more real power than any minister. On the other side, a 15-year-old girl raised by the sternest mother in Europe to believe such women were sin-walking, and who has, besides, been adopted by the king's own spinster daughters, 3 sour, pious, disappointed aunts, who hate Du Barry with the whole of their unused hearts and are delighted to have a Dauphine to fight through. And here is the weapon, the only weapon in the whole war. At court, no one may address a person of higher rank first. Du Barry, whatever her diamonds, cannot speak to the Dauphine until the Dauphine speaks to her. And the Dauphine, coached by the aunts, stubborn as her mother, does not speak. Month after month, season after season, in rooms 50 feet long before hundreds of witnesses, the future Queen of France and the King's favourite stand near each other, and one of them says nothing, and the nothing is louder than cannon. Ambassadors report the nothing to their courts. The king himself grows cold about the nothing. Her mother, the Empress, terrified the nothing will wreck the alliance, sends letters that practically smoke. Count Mercy manoeuvres, the aunts counter-manoeuvre, and a teenager holds the line of her silence against the combined pressure of 2 empires, because it is the one thing at Versailles that is entirely hers to withhold. It ends. The walls have the date within the hour, on New Year's Day, 1772. The court files past. Du Barry stands where she cannot be avoided, and the Dauphine, having been worked on for 2 years by everyone from her mother downward, looks in her general direction and says 8 words. There are a lot of people at Versailles today, that's all. Not even to her, near her. A remark about attendants, and it lands like a treaty signed. The king beams, Vienna exhales, dispatches gallop for 3 capitals reporting the sentence verbatim, and Du Barry glows as if knighted. 8 words, 2 years in the making, wrung out of a girl who then, they say, wept with fury in private and swore that woman would never hear her voice again, and kept the vow. I tell you this story for one reason. Learn from it what the currency of this place really is. Not gold. Gold is everywhere here. Gold is wallpaper. The currency of Versailles is acknowledgement. Who is seen, who is spoken to, who exists. You knew that already from below. You are a wall, and walls are not seen. What the Du Barry War teaches you is that it goes all the way up. At the very summit of the world, among people who own provinces, the fight is still and only about being seen. One sentence of being seen, worth 2 years of war. The whole palace, top to bottom, is starving for the same bread. Bertha puts it her way, wringing a cloth the colour of dishwater. 50,000 people in this town, little Picard, and every last one of them waiting to be spoken to first. Kings and scullions. Same hunger, different plates. Now hand me the sand. There is one more world inside this world that you come to know, and it saves the whole place in your memory from being only stone and spite. The stables. The great stables of Versailles face the palace across the Place d'Armes like a rival court, and in some ways they are one. Over 2,000 horses at the peak, and the grooms and pages and farriers and saddlers to serve them. A whole nation of horse under one curved roof. You go there often in your later years, running kitchen errands to the households lodged that side, and you linger when you can, because the stables are the one grand thing at Versailles that smells honest. Warm straw, oiled leather, ammonia sharp enough to make your eyes sting at the door and forgotten 2 breaths later. The sweet dusty breath of haylofts, and under it all the great mild animal warmth of 1,000 bodies in their stalls, sound like nowhere else. The ocean noise of feeding, the stamp and shift, iron shoes ringing court music on cobbles, the farrier's hammer laying down its rhythm, steam rolling off the shoeing stall in winter like the building itself were breathing. Horses do not know rank. That is the secret joy of the place. A horse will lip at a duke's coat and a bucket boy's shoulder with exactly the same opinion of each, and the men who live among them catch some of that levelness. In the stables you are spoken to. In the stables men ask your name. And it is at the stables, early on a grey autumn morning in your 4th year, that you see her closest, closer than the wedding, closer than the galleries, and see the thing the pamphlets never printed. She rides. The Dauphine, against her mother's written orders. The Empress fears riding will cost her the child that does not yet exist, fears it coarsens the complexion, fears everything. The girl has fought for and won her horses, first donkeys as a compromise that fooled no one, then real horses, and by now she rides out to follow the hunt, and the stables adore her, because she comes early, and she comes without half her retinue when she can shed them, and she knows the grooms' faces. That morning you are waiting on a delivery of bran and honey, marchands, for the table, not the horses. Standing out of the way by the arch, and a small party comes across from the palace in the mist, cloaks and quick footsteps, and it is her. 17 now, no diamonds at this hour, a plain grey habit, her face still soft with sleep and completely, unguardedly happy, an expression you've never once seen on it in a state room. A groom leads out her horse, and she does the thing you will tell your grandchildren. Before mounting, she pulls off one glove and produces from somewhere in the habit a crust of bread, and gives it to the horse from her bare palm, and while the horse takes it she leans her forehead, just for a second, against the flat of its cheek and closes her eyes. 1 second. Then the mask is back. The groom cups his hands for her boot. She is up. She laughs at something one of her party says. The famous laugh, the one Vienna keeps writing to her about. Too loud for a Dauphine. And the mist takes them at a trot toward the park. The old head groom beside you, a man bow-legged as a barrel hoop, watches her go and says, "To the mist more than to you." That one would have been happy as a farmer's wife with 6 horses and a dozen dogs. Wrong ticket in the lottery, that's all. Wrong ticket both directions. He spits politely and goes back in. Wrong ticket both directions. You think about that for years. The bucket boys dreaming upward at the candles. The girl at the top leaning her head against a horse to steal 1 second of downward, ordinary, unwatched life. The lottery deals everyone a cage and lets everyone see the others, and the seeing is half of every sorrow in this place. She will build herself the cage she wanted in the end. When she is queen, they will give her the Petit Trianon, the little palace in the park, and later she will add the Hameau, a toy village with a real working farm. real cows milked into porcelain, and the pamphlets will tear her to pieces for it. The Austrian playing milkmaid while Paris starves. And the pamphlets will not be entirely wrong about the cost of it, and will be entirely wrong about the heart of it. It was never mockery of the poor. It was a woman ordered at 14 to live her whole life on a stage, buying back at insane expense, because insane expense was the only currency she'd ever been taught, one walled garden where no one was watching. You saw the whole project already, that morning in the mist, in 1 second of forehead against horse. Be gentle with people's gardens is what I am saying. You rarely know what they are walls against. And what of your nights, the few that are yours? Because even walls get an evening off, and the town below the palace has an entire second economy built on the off hours of 10,000 servants. The place your kitchen goes is a cabaret in a lane off the Rue de la Paroisse called the Image Saint-Martin, and from the street it is nothing. A low door, a lantern, a painted sign gone grey. Inside it is your whole world off duty. Smoke you could hang a ham in, tallow light, benches worn to a shine by 40 years of liveried backsides, and on them, elbow to elbow, the underside of the machine at rest. Grooms still smelling of the stables, chair carriers with their shoulders permanently uneven, laundry girls with hands bleached white pink to the wrist, a wig-maker's boy sneezing powder, 2 of the Swiss off-duty and enormous, and kitchen people, always kitchen people, because kitchen people finish latest and drink fastest. The wine is thin and honest about it. The talk is not. The talk is the true Gazette of Versailles, hours ahead of the ambassadors and years ahead of the historians. Who is ruined at play, which countess's diamonds are paste now, and which jeweller quietly holds the real ones, which minister's coach was seen where it should not have been, what the laundry says, always, in these years, what the laundry says. You mostly listen. Listening is free, and you have discovered you are good at it, and Bertha has taught you the house rule of the walls, which is that gossip is like kitchen fat. Skim it, trade it, but never be caught wearing it. There are cards, and you learn the price of them once. A game called Brellan, 3 hands, 1 evening, a week's small store of coins gone into a chair carrier's pocket, with nothing to show but the lesson. And after that you keep to watching. The high world upstairs is ruining itself at cards for provinces. The low world down here does it for sous. The faces at the moment of losing are identical. One more thing rank turns out not to touch, and then the walk home, and the walk home is its own chapter of your education. Versailles by night is dark the way the future will forget darkness can be. A few oil lamps on the great avenues, guttering in their glass cages, and past their small circles. Nothing. A blackness with buildings in it. You learn to navigate by feel and inventory. 12 paces from the cabaret door to the corner post, the gutter's cold seam underfoot to be stepped across at the chandler's, the loom of the parish church against the sky glow, the smell of the stables arriving exactly when it should, meaning halfway. You learn the watchman's lantern and his tuneless humming, both reassuring. You learn which lane the footpads favour after quarter days, when servants walk home with wages on them, and you walk the long way those weeks, because a boy was found in the ditch by the Saint-Antoine gate your second winter, alive but wrong ever after, and nobody was ever taken for it. Some nights the palace surprises you on the way. You come out of the lane, and there it is at the head of the avenue, 1 wing lit gold for some fete you carried the firewood for, music arriving in threads on the wind, a spray of rockets standing briefly in the black over the gardens, and you stop in the cold with your hands in your armpits and watch your own day's work burning beautifully half a mile away, and feel the strange doubled feeling that never leaves you all 11 years, that none of it is for you, and that none of it would exist without you, and that both of these are simply true at once, like the two faces of a coin, and the coin is France. Then up the black stairs by feel, rope in hand, past the 4th step that creaks, and the 9th that doesn't anymore because you wedged it, and into the attics breathing dark and onto the straw, bones singing, feet throbbing their slow drum beat, tomorrow already leaning on the door. That is a night off. In the walls of the trap, you would not trade it. That is the strangest part. The part you could never make the beer shop grievanceman understand. You would not trade it. The machine is monstrous and the machine is magnificent, and you are 16, 17, 18 inside it. Strong, needed, fed, learning. Surrounded every day by the most beautiful made things on earth, and the best gossip in Europe, and misery and wonder have agreed, somewhere above your head, to split you evenly between them. Most lives are that treaty. Yours just has better wallpaper in it. 2 more pieces of this world, and then I will let the years run. The first is the food itself, the journey of a dinner, because you live inside that journey, and no one who eats the dinners has ever once thought about it. The king's table and the kitchens that serve it are separated in this most calculated of palaces by an absurdity. The food is cooked in the Grand Commune and in offices scattered across the road and must travel, out of the building across a public street, through gates, upstairs, along galleries, before it reaches a royal mouth. The procession that carries it is called the viande du roi, the king's meat, and it moves with an armed escort, and every person it passes must uncover and bow. Men doff their hats to a tureen, because the tureen is on royal service, and the service is sacred even when the servant is soup. And the soup arrives cold. Of course it does. Everything arrives cold, or arrives cooled to that tepid, defeated temperature that is worse than cold, after it's escorted 1/4 mile in the open air of a January evening. The greatest kitchen establishment in the world, hundreds of cooks, the finest produce of a continent, and the King of France has eaten lukewarm dinners his entire life, because the machine values the procession above the temperature. Layers of covered dishes, chafing stands, hot water baths under the platters. You have carried all of it. It is a war against physics fought with silver, and physics wins nightly, and nobody will redesign the route, because the route is etiquette, and etiquette is the load-bearing wall of the world. If you want to understand why, 20 years from now, this regime cannot reform itself, even to save its own head, you do not need the philosophers. You only need to have carried the king's cooling soup across a public road behind a man with a sword, both of you bowing traffic aside in the rain. The second piece is the day the girl conquered Paris, because before Paris learned to hate her, Paris fell in love with her, and you were, in a small way, there. June of 1773, 3 years married. The couple's first official entry into the capital, delayed and delayed and delayed again by court intrigue, until at last the state coaches roll, and half the palace's service rolls ahead of and behind them, and you are in a provision wagon in the tail of that comet, and so you see it. Paris turned out entire. The whole city in the streets and stacked in the windows and clinging to the roofs, hour after hour of roaring flowers coming down like weather, the markets sending delegations, the fishwives, by ancient right the familiars of French queens, bellowing blessings and frank advice about heirs, At the Tuileries, the crowd in the gardens is so vast the royal party can barely reach the balcony, and when they do, the roar doubles, and the girl, 18 now, is seen to go pale at the size of it. The sheer animal mass of the love, and the old Marshal de Brissac, governor of Paris, leans to her and says the sentence every wall in France repeats for a year afterward: "Madame, you have before you 200,000 people who have fallen in love with you." And she writes to her mother. The letter's contents leak as everything leaks. That what touched her most was the tenderness of a poor people who, despite the taxes crushing them, were transported with joy at seeing her. She saw it. That is the wrenching thing, knowing what you know from the roof of your long life. She saw the crushing taxes and the joy in the same look, at 18, and named them in one sentence to her mother, and then the machine closed around her again, and the 200,000 went home to the bread prices, and the love and the hunger were left to race each other down the years. You know who won, but on that June day the street smelled of trampled flowers, and a girl on a balcony pressed her hand flat to her chest as if to hold her heart in, and 200,000 people meant it. Both things were real. Keep both. History is only bearable if you keep both. I should tell you too about the aunts and about the paper war, because both shaped the years you lived through more than any battle. The aunts, mesdames, the court calls them, Adelaide and Victoire and Sophie, the old king's unmarried daughters, live in their own apartments like three weathers in one house. Adelaide all pride and scheme, Victoire all softness and pastry, Sophia shadow who speaks only during thunderstorms, when terror makes her suddenly briefly warm to everyone in reach. Their lives are the cautionary tale of the machine run to its end. Princesses of France, forbidden by rank to marry down and never matched up, kept 40 years in gilded rooms with nothing to govern but their dinner and their dogs, and when she arrived, one homesick 14-year-old, into whose ear Adelaide poured, drop by daily drop, the poison about Du Barry, the nicknames, the grudges of a lifetime, because a Dauphine was the first weapon of consequence fate had ever put in her hand. The girl escaped them within a few years, as her own confidence grew. The lesson stayed with you longer. Idleness at the top of the world is not rest. It is a slow flood, and it finds every crack, and it always drains toward malice. Bertha's version, over the sand and vinegar. Nobody sins like the bored little Picard. Pray for work till you die. And the paper. From your middle years onward you watch it rise like a tide mark on every wall. The pamphlets, the songs, the prints. Paris has always sung about its rulers. That is old. There were verses about kings before there was printing. But something in these years changes gear. The presses across the borders in London and Amsterdam discover that filth about the French court sells like bread in famine, and a whole industry assembles. Hack writers, some of them half-starved abbés, some of them spies, some of them blackmailers openly offering the court the chance to buy an edition before it ships. The couple's 7 silent years are the industry's gift and engine. A royal marriage with nothing happening in it is a vacuum, and print abhors a vacuum, and what floods in is invention, each version fouler and funnier and more confident than the last. You have held these things in your hands in the cabaret, smudged octavos passed under the table, and watched a bench of tired servants laugh at people some of them have served that same day. Laugh, and pass it on, and not exactly believe it, and not exactly not. That is the mechanism, and you saw it early and closer than the ministers did. Nobody has to believe a libel. It only has to be repeated until the shape of it is worn into the mind's floor, like your stair rope worn greasy, so that years later, when hunger comes asking for someone to blame, the path is already smooth and leads where it has always led, to the foreigner, to the woman, to l'autre chienne. The court's response for years is the machine's response to everything. It pretends not to see. Walls do not read. And by the time anyone above stairs understands that the paper war was the real one is over and lost, and the tumbrils are being built out of the verdict. But that is the far end of the road. In the middle of it, where you live, the pamphlets are just weather, and the years, as I said, run. The seasons take you, the way they take everyone here, and each one has its own body. Summer is the season of stink and splendour. The court is at its fullest. The fountains run for ambassadors. The orangery breathes its perfume over the wall, and the heat lies on the town like a wet dog. Meat turns in hours. The icehouse is besieged. You make the run to Duval's cold dome 4 times a day, and stand an extra stolen minute each trip in that stone winter, steam rising off your own arms, before climbing back into July. The palace itself cooks. Under the lead roofs, in the attic warren where hundreds of courtiers, servants and poor gentlefolk are lodged, the air by August is furnace thick, and the great staterooms below hold the smell of the whole summer's humanity in their tapestries. Foreign visitors write home in wonder about both things in the same letter. The most sublime rooms in Europe and the smell. Autumn is hunting. The whole court's calendar bends around the Dauphin's one joy. He rides to hounds 3-4 days a week, comes back mud to the eyebrows, transformed, loud, alive, and the kitchens groan under game. Carts of it, roebuck and boar and partridge beyond counting, more than any 600 people could eat, and what the tables refuse rolls downhill through the hierarchy of the household, sold and resold, because at Versailles even leftovers have rank. The serving of the king's table is a property right. The men who hold it retail his uneaten dinners in the town, and respectable families in Versailles dine, at one remove and a fair price, on the King of France's refused pheasant. Nothing here is wasted, and everything here is skimmed. It is the most magnificent corruption in Europe, and it works after its fashion, the way a water wheel works, by leaking at every joint while still turning the stone. Winter empties and tightens the place. The great families with anywhere better to be go there. Wind off the plain of Versailles finds every gap in the 2,000 windows. The staterooms are so cold that wine freezes at the king's own table, and the courtiers stand game after game of cards in fur muffs. And below, your world contracts to the fires. You're a fire boy in earnest now, and winter teaches you its craft in your hands. The sting of split oak's grain driving splinters into cracked winter skin. The trick of laying a fire that will catch in one strike of the steel, because chamber servant is watching, and a second strike is a small disgrace. Chilblains on your knuckles itching like guilt in the warmth every evening. The eerie beauty of the Hall of Mirrors on a January dawn, when the frost flowers on all 17 windows and the mirrors double the frost, and the whole gallery is white and silver and utterly silent, and your breath goes up like the smoke of a small private offering. 2 winters stand out of the row of them like taller trees. The first is the Winter of the Needles, 1774, the summer after the old king's terrible death, though the courage of it belongs with the winters somehow, being a cold-blooded kind of bravery. Smallpox has just killed a king of France in the most public horror imaginable, and the new king, your locksmith, 20 years old, does a thing that stuns the court and half the doctors of Paris. He has himself inoculated, and his brothers with him. Understand what this means in 1774. Inoculation is the old method, decades before vaccine. Live matter from a smallpox sore introduced into scratches on the arm. A deliberate dose of the very death that has just emptied the throne, gambling a controlled illness against the uncontrolled one. The Sorbonne mutters that it is tempting God. Half the old court calls it Austrian nonsense, English nonsense, philosophy with a knife. The young queen, whose mother had the whole imperial family in Vienna inoculated years before, is loudly, publicly for it, and the shy boy who cannot speak in council does it. Takes the scratches, takes the fever, sweats it out at the little chateau of Marly while the kingdom holds its breath, and comes back well, and inoculation becomes, overnight, the fashion of France. Ladies wear ribboned caps, a l'inoculation with little serpents and clubs on them, because this court can turn even epidemiology into a hat. You remember it below stairs for a different reason. That fortnight at Marly, the kitchens cooked convalescent food for a king. Possets, broths, everything strained twice. And Marchand handled those broths himself, tasting with the tip of a spoon like a man diffusing something, because the whole line knew that if the king sickened past expectation, someone would look first at the pot. Nothing happened. The king mended. But you learned the taste of the fear that seasons royal cooking, always, under everything. The knowledge that between poison and bad luck the law has historically seen little difference, and the pot is yours. The second is the great frost, the winter of 1776, when the cold came down off the plain like a lid and stayed. The Seine froze in Paris. Here the Grand Canal froze a foot thick and more. The fountains stood in cases of ice like glass fruit, and the court, which can make a festival of anything, made one of this. Sleighs came out of the stores, some of them 50 years old, carved and gilded, dolphins and dragons and shell thrones on runners, and were painted fresh and strung with bells. And the young queen, who had grown up with real winters and had been homesick for snow through 6 mild French years, went sleighing. Day after day, down the great avenues and around the frozen canal, furs to the chin, bells pouring sound into the white air, sometimes out along the road toward Paris itself, until the whisper started. There is always the whisper now, you notice its new speed, that the Austrian was parading her Vienna habits, playing at the north while the poor froze, and the sleighs went back into the stores before the thaw took the snow. Even her weather was political, even snow. But before the whisper there was one afternoon you keep. The kitchen sent hot wine out to the canal in wrapped stone bottles. Servant's errand, your errand. And you stood on the bank in the iron air with your breath smoking, and the sleighs came down the long white sheet of the canal in line, bells and hooves and the hiss of runners, torches already lit in the blue dusk, and the whole gilded, doomed, ridiculous, beautiful apparatus of the court went flying past you across the frozen water like something out of a story told to children. And for exactly as long as the bells took to fade, you forgot the price of bread, and so did everyone on that bank, gaping, delighted. That is what the thing was for. That was always what the thing was for, the forgetting. It worked on kitchen boys at 40 paces. It worked, God knows, on the people inside the sleighs. The bill for the forgetting was still being drafted, but the bells were real, and the dusk was blue, and your hands around the warm stone bottle were, for 1 minute of one winter, the hands of a boy at a festival, and I will not pretend otherwise just because I know how it ends. And spring brings the mud, and the first asparagus, which the court receives with more ceremony than it gives most treaties, and the general stirring of the machine's sap, and each May, the anniversary, the weddings, and the other one. Each 30th of May, you find a reason to be alone for an hour. Berta knows why. She has stopped asking and started silently, saving you that day's heel of white bread, which is her language for everything she has no words for. Somewhere in your 3rd year, Toineau finishes growing up beside you and is taken on by the household of a Marshal of France and leaves for Paris with his bundle and his cowlick, promising to write, which neither of you pretends will happen, and a new boy has his side of the pallet, a heartbroken 12-year-old from Normandy who cries at night with his fist in his mouth so as not to be heard, and you lie in the dark listening, remembering, and finally say to the ceiling the thing that is true. It gets easier, not soon, but it does. He doesn't believe you, you didn't either, and the years do the thing years do. They go. The old king dies in the spring of 1774, and you are in the palace when it happens, and it is a thing no one who was there ever forgot. Smallpox takes him horribly. The body of the once handsomest man in France rotting alive in the state bed, while etiquette, that iron nonsense, requires the court to attend the disaster, and the smell of the sick room, they say, reached the Hall of Mirrors. You believe it. You were carrying wood that fortnight, and the whole wing was sweet and wrong. By custom, a lit candle stands in the window of the sick room while the king lives. The whole palace watches that window for days, and on the 10th of May, at 3:15 in the afternoon, the candle is put out. What happens next, the walls will tell forever. A noise begins far off in the state apartments, and it grows, and it is running at Versailles, where no one runs. The entire court, hundreds of people, sweeps like a tide out of the dead king's antechambers and thunders through the galleries. A sound, one witness said, like thunder itself, racing to be first to reach the new king and queen and kneel. You hear it from a service stair, that stampede of red heels, the parquet booming, and you feel the hair stand on your arms without knowing why. They find them, the boy and the girl, 19 and 18 now, already on their knees, holding each other, both in tears, and everyone hears what they say, and everyone repeats it, and whatever else the pamphlets ever printed about them. This they said, and it was this: Dear God, guide us and protect us. We are too young to reign. They were. That is the whole tragedy in one sentence, kneeling on a parquet floor. They were too young for the wedding, too young for the bed, too young for the throne, and the machine did not care, because the machine was built by a sun king for giants of appetite and cunning, and it had wound down at last to 2 shy children holding hands in a corridor while 6,000 people ran at them. You stay 11 years in all. You leave in 1779, 25 years old, a trained cook with Marchand's growl in your ear forever, a wife from the town, a place waiting in a good house in Amiens, and on your last morning you do a thing you have never dared. You go up through the attics, past the Dauphin's old forge, out a workman's hatch, and onto the roof of the palace of Versailles. The lead is cool under your palms in the dawn. The roof spreads around you in grey plains and ridges, forested with chimneys, hundreds of chimneys, your fires, 10 winters of your fires, and below and beyond, the whole world you have carried on your shoulders lies out flat in the early light. The gardens rule their green geometry to the horizon. The Grand Canal, a bar of struck silver a mile long, laid crosswise like a sword on an altar. The fountains are silent. No one is here to perform for. The stage is empty, and empty. It is honest, and honestly it is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen or ever will. Eastward, the three great avenues run off toward Paris, toward the square with the ditches, toward everything that is coming. The town smokes gently. A bell rings the hour and another answers, and under your feet, faint as a pulse, you can feel the machine beginning. Doors, water, fires, footsteps, the walls waking. You're such a small part of this. You always were, but every fire in every room below burned because hands like yours built it, and the great glittering impossible thing at your feet ran every day of its existence on the backs of people no painting will ever show. That is not bitterness. That is just the truth. And you find, standing on the roof, that the truth has a strange taste, half iron and half pride, and that you can hold it, and the beauty in the same mouth at the same time. You never see any of them again, but you follow it all from Amiens, the way the whole world follows it. The diamond necklace, the pamphlets, the deficit, the hunger, the summoning of the estates, and then the October night in 1789 when 6,000 hungry Parisians, most of them women, walk the 12 miles through the rain to Versailles to fetch the baker's wife, and the baker's boy, as the crowd calls them, back to Paris. And the palace empties and never fills again. And then the square, the machine in the square. January 1793 for him, and the accounts agree he died with a courage that astonished his enemies, trying to speak to the crowd until the drums were ordered to drown him. October 1793 for her, 37 years old, hair gone white, in a plain white dress in an open cart along streets that had once cheered her crystal coach. And on the scaffold she stepped, by accident, on the executioner's foot, and the last recorded words of Marie Antoinette, the girl whose dog they took at the border, were, "Pardon me, monsieur, I did not do it on purpose." Politeness, at the very end, to the man about to kill her. 14 years old at Cale, she straightened her back and embraced a stranger because charm was the only weapon they had left her. 23 years later, on the platform it still was. You're an old man by then, and you read the news in Amiens with your grandchildren playing at your feet, and you think of a boy at a forge saying thank you to a wall, and a small girl glittering under diamonds that weighed like a yoke, and you close your eyes and you let the bells of Amiens turn, for a moment, into other bells. But that is all far away tonight. Tonight it is still 1770, and you are still 16, and the day of days, the wedding day, the day this whole story began, is finally ending, and we should go back and put you to bed in it, because that is what we came here to do. It is past midnight in the Grand Commune. The last silver has come back down from the opera house and been counted twice, piece by piece, by candlelight, by two stewards who trust no one, including each other, because a single missing spoon from the king's service is a hanging matter, and everyone in the room knows it. The great fires are banked, raked down to seamed orange coals that breathe when the draught finds them, tick and settle, tick and settle. The floors have been scraped and sanded. Bertha has gone to her cot in the scullery annex with her feet, she announced to the room, worn down to the ankle bones. Marchand made his last round, touched 2 pots, moved 1 ladle 2 inches for reasons known only to Marchand and God, and climbed heavily to his room, and you climb to yours. 4 flights, your hand on the greasy rope, your wooden heels too tired to clatter. Every stair sends its own dull note up through your legs. Your shoulders carry the ghost of the yoke even empty. They always do by night now, a phantom weight, as if the body keeps the buckets ready. The burn stripes at the base of your thumbs pulse softly in time with your heart. Your feet inside their stockings feel twice their size. There is grease under every fingernail and smoke in every fold of you, and when you pull the blue coat off in the dark of the attic and hang it on its nail, it holds your shape for a moment, standing at attention without you, one more servant on duty. Toineau is already down and already dreaming in Auvergnat. You lower yourself onto the straw, and the straw receives you with its dry crunch and its sour, familiar breath, and the palate that felt like penance in October feels tonight like the mercy of God. Through the little window under the eaves, the palace stands across the road, and tonight only, it is lit. Every window, thousands of candles burning in honour of the marriage, the whole vast front of it laid out in points of gold against the wet spring dark, doubled and trembling in the puddles of the courtyard, and even the rain has stopped as if it too were only part of the programme. Somewhere behind 2 of those windows, curtained now, a boy is asleep and a girl is awake, and the future of Europe is a made bed with nothing in it but 2 children lying very still, very carefully, not touching, each pretending for the other's sake to sleep. Let them lie. History will be hard enough on both of them. Tonight they're just tired, like you. Listen to the building around you. The Grand Commune at night has its own slow language. The roof lead contracts overhead in the cool tick by tick like a great animal cooling after a run. A shutter shifts somewhere on its hook. Rats go about their small administrations behind the wainscot. Brisk, professional. You have made your peace with the rats. They were here before you, and they will hold the freehold long after. Down through 4 floors, faint as memory, the banked fires breathe. A cart passes on the paving far below, late provisions or early bread, iron tires on wet stone, rising, passing, gone. A sentry somewhere changes his footing. The palace clock across the road lets fall 1 stroke, a single bronze drop into the dark, and does not say which hour it belongs to, and you're too far gone to care. Your body begins its accounting limb by limb, the way it does every night. The shoulders first, unclenching in slow degrees, giving up the yoke at last. The small of the back flattening gratefully into the straw. The hands take longest. They always do. Hands are the last to believe the day is over. The fingers uncurling from the shapes of handles and buckets and billets of oak. Letting go, until they lie open at your sides like something washed up on a beach, empty, finished, at rest. You are warm enough. You are fed. You are safe. You've carried water enough today for 100 sauces and wood enough for 20 fires. You have seen a princess arrive and a palace blaze with candles. You have been invisible all day to the greatest people in Europe, and you are learning that invisibility, worn rightly, is a kind of armour, and behind it you are becoming someone. A boy with a trud growing in his hands, a place in the machine, bread twice a day, and 1 friend who talks in his sleep, and 1 who saves you the heel of the white loaf. That is more than most of France has tonight. That is enough. That is enough. That is enough. Tomorrow there will be water. Tomorrow there will be fires. Tomorrow there will be marchands saying you're late when you're not late, and coppers to fill, and stairs and stairs and stairs. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow is on the far side of the dark, and the dark is wide tonight, and slow and kind. The candles across the road are going out now, window by window. Some servant like you is walking the galleries with a snuffer on a long pole, unmaking the glory one flame at a time, and no one is watching him do it, and it does not matter, because the glory was only ever candles, and candles were only ever tallow and string, and tallow and string were carried up the stairs on shoulders like yours. Let them go out. Let the whole bright front of it fade, window by window, gold to grey to nothing. Centuries will pass. The palace you fell asleep beside will empty, and echo and fill again. Not with courts, but with crowds, wandering the hall of mirrors in strange clothing, holding up small black boxes to catch the light, walking in 20 minutes through rooms it took you 11 years to learn. The fires you fed will go cold forever, and other light no one alive tonight could dream of, will come on at the touch of a hand. The road to Paris will be travelled in half an hour. The square with the ditches will be all traffic and fountains, and almost no one crossing it will know what the stones knew. But people will still live by their hands, still climb stairs tired at midnight, still share their bread and their beds and their small stubborn kindnesses in the walls of whatever bright machines the future builds, still lie down at the end of long days in great cities and small rooms, listening to a building settle, feeling their shoulders finally let go. Some things don't change. The tired body doesn't change. The need, at the end of everything, for rest, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Jacques Verrier in his attic under the lead roof, across the road from 10,000 candles, 2.5 centuries ago tonight. Let the palace fade. Let the bells go quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The water is carried, the fires are banked, the doors are locked, and every lock was made by careful hands, and it holds. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.